Today's session is really all about thinking. Thinking in the right kind of way. And thinking in a way which will serve you particularly well when it comes to this assignment of writing a proposal and of critiquing other people's work and of writing your own paper and presenting in conferences. In order to do that, the fundamental prerequisite has to be clear, unambiguous thinking. I want us to look at the kind of approach that you need to adopt if you're going to be able to look at other people's work in particular and critique that very clearly. Let me give you a brief outline of the talk today. And it'll take about, I should think, 45 minutes to go through this talk. Then we'll have a break, and then we'll have a session where we're looking at answers to questions for the conference. And hopefully we'll be able to sort some of those out. I see some people are not here who we may need to rely on. We'll see how we get on. So I want to talk to you first of all about two thinking models, which I hope will help to set the scene of the right and the wrong way for thinking. I want us to see how thinking is important because of what it leads on to. I want us to see how it can be a life-changing, or should be a life-changing experience in terms of the learning that we do. Look at the learning pyramid. Look at the critical principle. And the single thing which is probably the most important thing I can teach you in this entire unit is this critical principle. It's a simple, simple thing. And that will guide your thinking and your entire way of life if you get it right. And then we'll look at how we apply that. The bulk of what I want to talk about really is going to be here. How to critique a paper or a proposal, or indeed anything that someone has written. And I want you to learn the principles of how you approach other people's work. Because I'm going to ask you shortly, when you've produced your own project proposal, it's going to be circulated to 3 people within this room, and they're going to critique, and you're going to be one of them, critiquing other people's work. How will you go about doing that? I'm going to give you some indications of that today in a general way, and then next week I'll give you a particular template on how to do it specifically using a marking criteria. But in general, for today, I'm going to show you 10 questions that you need to ask, and then we'll just summarise everything and bring it all together. Okay? So that is my outline today. But first, a story. A story of a character which I'm sure you've heard of, a guy called Socrates, who became very, very famous for doing one very simple thing. All he did was he learned to ask questions. And it's a task which you all need to be able to do as well. Socrates lived around about 400 BC, which is quite some time ago. He was one of the most famous of all the Greek philosophers, and yet he never wrote a book. He never produced a thesis or a thing. All he did was he asked questions. And he so impressed people by his grasp of issues that his friend, or a number of friends, thought he might be the wisest man in the world. So actually one of his friends went to the Oracle at Delphi. Now the Oracle is a kind of place where any question could be asked and the gods would answer through it. And they said, is it true? They asked this question, is it true that Socrates is the wisest man in the entire world? And the answer came back, yes, Socrates is the wisest man in the entire world. So they went to tell Socrates, Socrates, we've discovered you're the wisest man in the world. He said, you know what? That is absolute rubbish. It's got to be rubbish. And you know why? It's rubbish. It's because I know nothing. I don't know anything. In fact, the more I learn to think about things and question things, the more I realise I know next to nothing. So he said, well, never mind about that. The oracle tells us that you are the wisest man in the world. Gosh, he said. So he decided he thought this was paradoxical. He didn't know anything, and he was the wisest man. So he decided he would go and he would question people. And he questioned all the famous people he could, all the famous people in the town. He questioned about their professions. He questioned about what they knew. And the interesting thing is this: all he did was ask questions. He asked them questions about what they knew. And do you know what? The embarrassing thing he found out is that the more questions he asked people about what they knew, the less they couldn't answer. He put them on the spot. It's like a sort of Jeremy Paxman of the ancient days, but far, far better than that. And when he pressed them for what they did know, what they didn't know, they ended up having to confess they didn't know anything at all. So the conclusion that Socrates finally came to was quite interesting. He solved his paradox because he realized that whereas he knew nothing, and he knew that, all the people that he'd spoken to, they all knew nothing either, as well. But the difference was, he alone knew that he didn't know anything. And that made him the wisest man in the world. And his ability to grasp that information. Yeah.
The only thing is, he said he didn't know anything, but then he believed the oracles in the first place.
Well, he believed the oracle, I suppose. Well, he didn't. He challenged the oracle. That's what doing this kind of thing. But the interesting thing is this: he so upset people in his town that all the magistrates, all the top people, they got so embarrassed by him asking these questions which they couldn't answer, that eventually they put him on trial for subverting the youth, and they found him guilty. And the tragedy of this is that in Athenian law at that time, if you were found guilty of something, you could propose 2 punishments, and they would accept one of them. So the 2 punishments that he proposed were either he would die, or he would be rewarded for his seditious behaviour with a big house, free meals, fantastic pension, and live a life of luxury for the rest of his life. They couldn't possibly have chosen that one, having found him guilty, so they had to choose the other one, and no one wanted to kill him, but they made him commit suicide by drinking hemlock. So the wisest man in the world didn't really live long enough to use that kind of wisdom, which is a great shame, but more an indictment on society than upon him. Socrates. And he showed his wisdom not by what he taught people, because he said he didn't have anything to teach. I cannot teach anybody anything, he said. I can only make them think. And that really is the purpose of not only this session today, it's also the purpose of this unit, to make people think. And to get you into that frame of mind where you can think about anything you like, and you can criticise and challenge other people's thoughts as much as possible. And I've got 2 models which I want to present you with, which enable us to see this a bit more clearly. It's the 2 thinking models, if you like. And the first thinking model is called the sponge model of thinking. And a lot of people think that thinking is a bit like this. And that the idea is that you put a sponge into a bowl of water, and the sponge soaks it all up. And that's how most people think. The trouble with that way of thinking is that it's very passive, doesn't involve you in a lot of activity, doesn't enable you to discriminate between what is good and what is bad. It doesn't enable you to pick out the excellent from the poor. You just take it all in and all absorb it. In fact, people who adopt this way of thinking, they end up thinking not very much about anything, because they only tend to think the thoughts which they were last fed, and their opinions tend to be about the last thing which they read, because they take in whatever it is that comes their way, and it becomes part of their thinking pattern. Unfortunately, I find, I wouldn't be surprised if you find too, that most people use the sponge method. for thinking. And their opinions are no stronger and no different from the last newspaper which they read. There is another method, though, of thinking, and this one here is called the panning for gold method of thinking. You know, where you go into a riverbed and you get this sort of stuff, and there's gravel, and odd bits of gold are in there, and the whole purpose of panning for gold is to try to discriminate between the gravel, which is worthless, and the quality gold, which is there in parts. This takes a lot more effort to do this kind of thinking. It takes a lot more effort to do this kind of work, because it involves you in a lot of struggling and working things out, looking at things, and getting rid of stuff, and not accepting everything. But you are involved in a process of working out what is good from what is not so good. And you do not let anything get passed into your brain to be accepted by you, which is not of the highest quality. And that panning for gold method of thinking is the way in which every one of us here has to adopt intuitively and make it a part of our way of life. And that really is the key feature here of what we need to do when we're going to apply this to this particular unit. To distinguish the gold from the gravel involves asking a lot of questions and a lot of weighing up of all the answers. And that leads to proper and true learning. Let me introduce you to true learning, or different ideas of learning, which I think you might find interesting. If I was to ask people what learning is all about, I may come up with many different answers. Actually, these are the kind of 6 answers which people give as to what learning is all about. And at the very bottom, I've labelled them from 1 to 6 here. This is the very lowest expectation of what learning is all about. And learning, for many people, is just the absorption of new facts. That's all it's about. I go into a class like this, I'm going to learn new facts, and that's all my life is about. I'm going to learn something more. Pay my fees, I'm going to learn some stuff, I'm going to go out with a qualification. For some people, it might be a bit more than that, because absorbing new facts doesn't require a lot of energy, but memorising new facts may actually take you to the next level, if you like. And some people think for learning, it's all about memorising stuff. I go away with a head full of new stuff, because I've memorised it all. The next level up, which is even better than that really, is mastering new techniques and skills. And some people think that learning is all about that bit, learning new techniques and skills. And for some, that's what it is. But learning new techniques and skills are things which I think even people who don't think very much can do. If you want to be a good cobbler who makes shoes for people, you've got to learn skills, and some very talented people can do those kind of jobs. And they learn those techniques and skills. But thinking is not often critical to that. These first 3 methods are what are called surface learning. Surface learning is a kind of skim over the pond. It's not going deep. These next 3, though, this is where learning becomes interesting. And this is called deep learning, where you are not just happy to skim across the surface, but you go down and you look for other things than what that can do for you. What you find here is the next thing is there are some people who come to lectures or to classes who really understand that learning is about creating a new way of looking at the world. And it helps them to see the world around them because they begin to understand principles and ideas. And being able to understand how the world works, they can create new structures of meaning for themselves. That becomes even more embedded when you come up to number 5, developing new ways of interpreting reality. And if you really learn about something and can transfer that learning to a wide range of things around you in the world, then you can start to see reality in a new way, in a deeper way. But I think number 6, the very top of the tree here, is probably the most important and the most crucial part of learning for you as individuals. And it's something you may never consider properly. But what learning really does, if it really affects you, if you really learn it properly, is it changes you as a person. And that is the critical part about learning. Changing you as a person, that is essentially what true learning is really all about. Taking on new habits, new ideas, new thought processes, new approaches to the way that you react to things, ideas that you take on. And I think this is the crucial thing here. Only when you understand that learning is about changing your life do you realise that it's quite a subversive activity, because it is not happy with the status quo. I'm not happy with the status quo. I'm not happy that you come here and that you would be the same as you are at the end than you are from the beginning. It's my hope that you will be different kinds of people from when you finish this little programme here to when you leave at the end and you have a different approach to things. Because what this is all about, really, is learning an approach to life where you make sure that no beliefs are unquestionable, no statement is safe from scrutiny, no evidence is uncontrovertible, and no conclusion is inescapable. You question everything. That's the point. You question everything. And you make it clear, because that is the Socratic method. That's the Socratic way. That's the one thing which Socrates taught the world, to question everything. And there is one simple rule for us to become more like Socrates, and in fact you have to all become like Socrates in order to do this unit properly, in order to do research properly, in order to think properly. And there's one very simple rule, it's one basic rule, which is the fundamental principle of critical thought and thinking. It's a very, very simple principle which we all need to learn by heart. It's this. In fact, it's so obvious, but so vital. This is the important principle. Question everything and assume nothing. This is what people do not normally do. People do not question everything and they assume everything. When they listen to news broadcasts, when they read newspapers, they question nothing about it. When they look at academic papers, when they look at statistics, they question nothing. They assume it's all true. And we have to have that frame of mind which says that we will not do that. We will question everything, we will assume nothing. And with that single guiding principle, I can guarantee you that if you can make that a part of your way of thinking, it will change your life. It will change whatever you look at. And it will change the kind of person you are, because you'll become discriminating in your thought processes. You'll be able to accept the good and reject the bad. You will not be carried along by a wave of popularism or ideas from other people. Many people are no more than essentially mental puppets, which the media like to pull strings from, make them think and act in certain ways. This is where it stops. We challenge it here. We make sure that we challenge everything that comes our way. We don't accept stuff just on authority or because we saw it in a newspaper or read it in a book. Question everything and assume nothing. That's our principle. So, on that basis then, I want us now to turn to look at how we use that, particularly in the context of this lecture, in this unit, to criticise papers. Now, you've got to write a paper. You've got to write something which is going to be read by other people. You've got to stand up and defend it. Now, in order to do that, you need to be able to understand other papers and other proposals and see how they've been done. But in order to look at them properly, you need to look at them critically. Not all papers and proposals are good. Some of them are rather poor and have been put together badly. Well, you can learn from that. You can learn how not to do it. Other papers have been put together very well, and you can learn to criticise them in a positive way. By the way, the key word I've highlighted in red here, criticise. Now, some people think that's a negative word, but in actual fact, that is one of the most positive words ever written. And the reason why is no improvement is ever made without some criticism somewhere along the line. You will not improve as a person unless you receive some criticism which tells you, actually that wasn't very good and this is better. And then you take that on board, you think, I see it. Criticism is the most positive tool you can come to use. But I'll tell you what, it's also the most difficult as well, and the reason why it's the most difficult is because we often take things personally. You know, if someone criticises your thoughts and your ideas, you think, I'm being personally attacked here, and you just jump to defence. That's the wrong way of looking at criticism. And to get an academic approach to things, to get an approach which is really going to benefit you, you have to learn never to take things personally, never to take criticism personally. Always see criticism as a positive tool. And if you can learn to do that, then what happens for you is that you stop putting up defence mechanisms immediately. You stop justifying yourself about things, and you start becoming open and thinking, well, wait a minute, let's listen to what the guy actually had to say, or what he was talking about here. What is it that I can do better? And the moment you have that mental attitude and approach, then you can make a change, then you can improve. But you cannot get to that point until you've learned to accept criticism. Yeah.
Sorry to take you back.
That's all right.
I'm still thinking about something I thought about, where you have to question everything. When you question something, you're given an answer. And that answer, you still have to question. What happens? You keep on questioning. When you stop questioning.
Never.
That's why you know nothing.
That's why you probably bias. It is an iterative process. In the same way that science is an iterative process. You know, when Galileo, I mentioned last week, came up with his ideas, did we stop there and say that was the perfect solution? No. It took hundreds of years, but criticism on top of that said it doesn't actually work here or there. Newton's ideas came beyond after Galileo. After Newton, we've got Einstein. Einstein produced his theories of relativity, which replaced those earlier theories. And beyond Einstein, you have Schrödinger and Heisenberg. And you have even more recent things. You have Feynman and people like that who will take quantum mechanics to the next level, quantum gravity, all those kind of things are pushing the boundaries further and further. And do we get to the end? Do we get to the stage where we can say, we now have the absolute truth? No, I don't think we do. But what we can say is we're getting closer to it. And it's a long process. I can't see the end of that, though, but we're getting closer to it. We're making progress, so I think it's an ongoing, lifelong process. And for us, individually, as individuals, learning is a lifelong thing, too. We never get to the point where I turn around and say, I know it all now. I'm always being challenged by different things. And I'm always open to criticism. Now, let me ask you a question about the word critical. Does anyone know what the word critical actually means? Yeah.
Yeah, it's about the Greek word krisi, means thinking.
Close. Yes, pretty good. You know, you're the only person, I've asked this question numerous times, and you're the only person that's actually gone back to the Greek.
Yes,
I have. I just wonder what that might be.
Can't start it there.
You see, it's an interesting word, critical, particularly in the English, because it can be used in lots of different ways. For example, if I read a newspaper article which is a critic has written about a theatre production, or maybe a play, or maybe a film, or maybe a show, a musical show, they produce a criticism. The critic produces a criticism of it. And the word critical comes from that. On the other hand, the word critical can also be applied to a patient in a hospital. You know, you say, gosh, that patient's in a critical condition. And it's the same word, the same meaning of the word. And also you may, for example, if you're a physicist, you understand that there may be such a thing as, say, a critical mass of uranium, which could explode and produce an atomic bomb of some kind. So you've got at least 3 different meanings, or seemingly 3 different meanings of the same word, where you have a critical review, a critical mass, and a critical condition for a patient. What is it that could possibly unite all those 3 different things together with the word critical? Well, it comes down to what you said. And the word critical comes from the Greek word krito, which means I judge. I judge. And it is the act of what the judge does that unites all these things together. Has anyone ever seen one of those courtroom dramas where they have a picture? In this country they've got the picture of the Old Bailey. The Old Bailey is the old criminal courts, and they've got a dome on top of the Old Bailey, and on top of the dome is a statue. And the statue holds 2 things in her hands. Does anyone know what's in the 2 hands of the statue on top of the Old Bailey criminal courts?
A scale and a sword.
There it is.
Exactly. It's not Greek.
That's a symbol of justice, what the judge does. The judge needs, in one hand, a sword in order to execute the penalties for transgressing the law. But on the other hand, you've got the scales. And you ask yourself, what on earth are the scales doing?
It's the balance between
balance. The actual act of judging something is a matter of using scales. It's a matter of weighing things up one way or the other. And the judge sits there with a scale balance and he weighs up the evidence. So much evidence on one side, so much evidence on the other side. What is the verdict? Yeah? That's what judging is all about. Okay? And that's what critical means. It means to make a judgment. And when you think of the words critical in the way I said, when you're a critic and you're producing a critical review, you are weighing up the show and you're saying what was good and what was bad about it. It's in the balance, and you say it was a good show. When you think of a patient in a hospital in a critical condition, what that means is their life is in the balance. They will live or die. We don't know what it's going to be at the moment. It could go one way or the other. Or when you talk about a critical mass in physics, then you are treating the critical mass is just the right amount of material. If it's a bit less than the scale, say, nothing will happen. It's perfectly fine. If it's just a little bit more, it goes down this way. It explodes into a massive explosion. That's what the critical mass is. It's in the balance again. So why I'm labouring this is simply this. You have to become critics. You have to be good at being critics, and you have to be good at accepting criticism. And you have to understand that critical things are a vital tool in thinking, a vital tool in improvement. And you need to be able to exercise those tools and become a judge yourself and involve yourself in critical thinking and critical assessment. Okay, so we will be involved in critique. We'll be involved in critiquing each other's work. We'll be involved in looking at each other's papers and proposals and those kind of things. And that critique comes from the word critical, is we're going to subject those things to critical analysis. And by critical analysis, we understand we're weighing them. And what we're looking for are strengths on the one hand and weaknesses on the other. And we're going to be quite fearless in bringing out both the strengths and the weaknesses. That's the nature of the issue here. We have to weigh up things in a way which analyses the weaknesses and strengths of a particular piece of research. And we do it in order to help other people. We do it in order to help each other. And we do it in order to help ourselves. Critical thinking, critiquing is a positive process, which by learning to push aside personal considerations can really benefit us if we take those criticisms on board. So, that's what we plan to do, and I'm going to show you the tools that we use. So, what do? We use our principle. We question everything and we assume nothing. That's where we start and that's where we head from. So, let's begin. I'm going to give you an example which you are going to be familiar with because you're all engaged in doing it. And that is a project proposal. We all have project proposals which we're going to write, and they're due in fairly soon. I think it's next Thursday. And I think it's at 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
Good. And this is the kind of object which you are going to have to write. I've got the template here. This is a project proposal. And although you can't read it because it's too contrast isn't high enough, this was one of last year's project proposals. I just blotted out the name. I'm going to leave this project proposal up for you, and I'm going to leave it in the on VLE so that you can see what. This was a good one, and it contains the title, it contains the area, and it contains aims and objectives of the whole lot. It's all in there. It won't be useful to you other than to see it as an example. This is a project proposal which was entitled, I'll read it to you, Using Optimization Techniques to Improve DNA Sequencing Analysis. Anyone doing that? Good. In which case you'll be able to use that one. Using optimization techniques to improve DNA. Now, here's where we start our questioning. You have to ask questions. You're going to be using the tools which enable you to criticize something. Your main tool is very simple, it's the question. Question everything and assume nothing. Use that as your basic principle, and you will then be able to apply that to this particular proposal. So, what's the first question? I've got 10 questions I'm going to run through here as quickly as I can to indicate to you the kind of questions you need to ask about the proposals. And when I do this, what I hope you're going to find from this is not only are you going to see how to criticize other people's work, but because you are creating it yourself now, you should be able to criticize your own work and therefore improve your work before you submit it. So that's my real aim here, my secondary aim. Questions you have to ask, 10 of them. The first one is, what are the issues and the conclusions? If you are going to look at somebody's body of work, you really have to get to the heart of the matter as quickly as you can. What are the issues here? What is the thing really about? And before you can evaluate an author's argument, you must clearly identify the issue and the conclusion. If you're looking at a paper, you've got the abstract. The abstract will help you because the abstract is a summary of the entire paper. Almost every paper that you see has got an abstract at the beginning, which is a complete summary of everything, and including the conclusions of the paper. So you can look at the abstract if there is one, and you can look at the research question as well. But you have to ask yourself the question, what are the issues and what are the conclusions? If you cannot identify the issues and the conclusions, then you do not have any inroad into the paper. How can you evaluate the author unless you know what he's trying to get you to persuade you to believe in beforehand? So, I will be looking out, when I look at your project proposals, when others do, for the research question, for example. This is going to be in the introduction somewhere. It'll be setting out your goals and your aims. What's the research question? Have you actually got a research question? Is it explicit? Is it clear? If you haven't got one, you mark that down as saying, it needs this, you know. Is there only one research question? Does it break up into parts? Is it absolutely clear? If you don't find a research question in the paper, you're going to be a bit stumped, because it means that the author themselves doesn't really know where they're going or what they're trying to find out. So it's really a very important thing to have in the paper or in the proposal. And do multiple questions. If you've got more than one research question, does that mean they aren't able to focus down on something? Or does it mean that they're properly a part of the whole thing? You have to ask this kind of thing about the proposal. Does the author justify the importance of the question? Is it worth asking? Is it worth looking at? And if it's important, how important is it? Is it something to be publishable in a major journal, or is it of not any great significance at all? How important is the research question? These are questions you're going to be asking, and you're going to be making notes about these things. So you read through the proposal, you read through the paper, you ask yourself these questions, and you make notes on the best answers you can come up with. How does the author demonstrate the question remains to be answered? There's no point asking a question that you already know the answer to. And one of the problems I find with proposals often is that projects are proposed where the answer is obvious and there's nothing you need to do to get the answer there. You know. So it needs to be something which doesn't know the answer to. Can you check that as well? What's there? So on this particular one, I've highlighted in red what's listed for you, and he does list the research questions here, and the questions are broken down into DNA sequencing, search optimization, and that, which is very clear. So you can find that kind of information in there. If it's not there, you say so. The second thing you have to ask yourself is, when you're reading a paper, when you're looking at the proposal, is the introduction good enough? Has there been enough background information provided? Or is it not clear what the whole thing is about? Does it have a clear thesis statement, a clear direction in which to go in? Or does it not have a clear statement? But once you've identified that, are the reasons for adopting it good enough? And again, on this I have been able to identify for you, under the aims and objectives of the project, clear information about that kind of area. So you can spot these things. The third question is, you have to ask, is there a clear methodology involved in this? Am I clear about what the methodology is? Remember, the methodology is a series of steps that the author plans to take in order to get to the answer that he wants to find. He set out a research question. He set out an aim to get over here. I've got to get over to this point here. Now, how am I going to get to that point over there? I've got to take these steps to get to that point. Are the steps valid? Are they right? The steps are the methodology, if you like. Has he chosen the right methods to get the right answers? You need to weigh that kind of thing up. Is there indeed a methodology there? Is it good enough? This is a question to ask. And there's a whole lot of methodologies in this particular one, so you can see what it looks like. This is a tricky one, very difficult to get hold of. But what are the assumptions which are underlying the whole process here that we've got in mind? Remember that assumptions are the beliefs that you take for granted, which may or may not be true, but they are beliefs that you take for granted. And usually you don't question them, but you should. Okay? Assumptions are things which are taken for granted and often not brought out. So if you have a conclusion, it often rests upon reasons. There's a reason here and a reason there, but there may be assumptions which are unstated, which people don't realise, and you have to dig those out and try to find them. There's evidence as well involved in this conclusion which holds everything up. And very much it's like one of these things, it's like a house of cards. When you're constructing an argument to get to the top, there may be amongst here good reasons and evidence, but there may be assumptions which you take for granted as being true without even testing them or thinking about them. If you can identify assumptions which are not true, then those assumptions fall. And if the assumptions fall and they're taken out, the whole thing will fall down. So it's very important to be able to understand what assumptions have gone into something like this. They are, as I say, beliefs you take for granted, which are usually not questioned, not brought out. You have to see under the surface to find them. When you identify assumptions, you have to check them. Which are not solidly based. They're not solidly based upon the evidence given. And you need to be able to check to make sure that the author has come to a reasoned conclusion. reasoned based upon the evidence. If they overstep the reasoning, then they can find that they don't have a solid conclusion to come to. They've jumped to conclusions. So, coming to the end, let me just say that there are things then for you to do. And the most important thing is that principle I gave to you: question everything and assume nothing when you are approaching your master's work. When you are listening to someone giving you a lecture here, whether it's some other lecturer or whether it's me, question what they're saying. Do not accept it on principle. Do not accept it because they look like they are old, wise people who have been around a long time, and therefore what they say must be good and true. It's not true. They can get things wrong. You are not to accept stuff just because the guy looks old and wise, or because he's got the name doctor in front of his name, or the word professor in front of his name. It's not good enough. You have to be reasoning people who will accept things based upon the evidence and reason, and not because of who the person is. So, question the introduction, question the background, question the research question the methodology, question the assumptions, question the variables, question the statistics, question the findings, and question the conclusions. Question everything. Do not allow something to come through which you're not happy with. You may not be able to question everything because it's quite a difficult task to do. But the principle here is that you are not prepared. You are not prepared to accept things unquestioningly. That is the crucial thing. There are some things, just to add, that you should not question. What not to question is, don't criticise a research paper for something which is beyond its purpose. If the purpose was to look at mobile phones, 4G, don't criticise it because it didn't look at 5G coming up around the corner. Do not demand the unobtainable. Why didn't he get this information? Why didn't she get that information? Well, you know jolly well that if they tried to do that, it would take them 100 years to draw that information in, and they'd never even get to the end of it. Don't demand the unobtainable. Do not make general statements in your feedback when you come to give your criticism of other people. Don't say, this research was well done with an interesting question, good data, because that means nothing. We want something specific. We want something that actually is measurable in some way. And do not let colleagues or friends down by simply giving them positive comments and nothing else than that. Making nothing but positive comments on a fellow student's paper is of no value whatsoever. Okay? That's an important principle. That doesn't mean that you are to be gratuitously insulting or objectionable. You do it kindly and with generosity. But the aim over everything is to help the other person. You're there to help the other person. If you're going to give a critique of someone else's paper, you are to help them. You're not to do them down. You're not going to get any delight in saying that was wrong, that was wrong, that was wrong. You say, these things were wrong, but they could be improved in this kind of way. That would really help you. That's the point of this whole process, is to help the other person. And do not allow colleagues to get away with stuff of research that doesn't do them any good. Finally, a quotation from Einstein to conclude with. No finer researcher, I would say, than Einstein. The one who follows the crowd will usually go no further than the crowd. The one who walks alone is likely to find himself in places no one has ever been before. You know what? It's questions that take you in these kind of directions. It's what's over there? No one's been over there. Let's go and have a look at that. What's round that corner? No one's ever looked, but I'm going to look because I've got a question to ask. So, ask as many questions as you can. And remember, question everything and assume